Meeting will now come to order. This is the March 12, 2013 meeting of the Town of Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. We'll begin by going into executive session. First item on the agenda, meeting minutes from February 26, 2013. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Commissioner Barrett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one addition. It does say that Ms. Neely sat in my place. I just arrived for the public hearing. Usually it says, like, Mr. Canelli and Mr. Barrett's arrived. It doesn't say that I arrived, but I was present for the public hearing items that night.
Thank you.
So if you could just add that I arrived, that would be good.
So, no. Are there any other additions, deletions, or corrections?
Who's voting?
Who's voting? Everybody's voting.
Okay.
We're short a few commissioners tonight, so everyone will vote. Seven. We have seven.
All hands on deck tonight.
That's why we have alternates.
We rule.
Hearing no more additions, deletions, or corrections.
We don't. We need a motion, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. We need. Thank you. Commissioner Alessi has moved to approve. With that one change, is there a second? Commissioner Jacobson has seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carries unanimously. Next item, new item to recommend to public hearing, 120, 144 Tuller Road subdivision application of Christopher Coco, Mel Grzada, Piakarski, and Jack and Mary Lou Casper for 7 lots in an R3 zone. Mr. Wendt?
You may recall that last year a similar application was denied on the issue of a cul-de-sac and an extension of an existing street. He revised the plan so the new proposed road now enters in off of Tuller Road rather than extending off of the existing adjacent street. So it's a completely revised plan that requires a hearing.
Thank you. Is there a motion to refer this to public hearing? Commissioner Jacobson has moved. Is there a second? Commissioner Neely has seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of moving to public hearing 120, 144 Tuller Road subdivision application of Christopher Coco, Mel Grzada, Piakarski, and Jack and Mary Lou Casper for 7 lots in an R3 zone, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Item will go to public hearing. We have one item under old business this evening, and that is 452 Brookside Drive subdivision application of the Benevolent Protective Order of Elks, number 2220 Incorporated, for 3 lots in an A zone. Public hearings were January 22nd and February 26th, 2013. We have until May 2nd, 2013.
Okay, give you a quick overview of what was presented at the hearing.
Thank you.
As mentioned by the chairman, this is a proposed 3-lot subdivision. 2 new home lots would be created. 1 lot would be remaining for the Elks Club. As mentioned, it is in an A zone, and it requires a minimum lot size of 9,375 square feet per lot. Lot number 1 proposes 12,786 feet, 2, 9,409 feet, and the remaining property for the Elks Club would be 53,131 square feet. The property has, as reported at the hearing, public sewer and public water available. There's also, one of the issues that was brought up at the hearing had to do with parking for the existing Elk Club. Evidently, 11 existing parking spaces would be eliminated from a total of 59 spaces if the subdivision was approved. A revised plan would be submitted, and what was indicated at the hearing that 48 spaces would remain, and as indicated by the original approval of the Elk Club, 44 spaces is the minimum that's required for their use. The staff would recommend, if in fact this was approved, that a condition of approval would be that a revised plan be submitted showing the remaining parking spaces. Other issues that were, well, the other main issue that was discussed at the hearing had to do with line of sight of not only the intersection near the subdivision, but also the actual line of sight from the parking driveways proposed. As reported at the hearing, in our subdivision regulations, there is section 2.1.4.4 that basically safe and adequate sight lines for particular conditions as determined by the town attorney shall be provided. Town engineer, I'm sorry. There was a plan submitted at the hearing by the applicant that indicated that on lot 1 there would be a sight line of 220 feet northerly and 200 feet southerly. And for Lot 2, there would be a sight line of 290 feet northerly and 200 southerly. The information that we have was referred to the town engineer and reviewed by the engineer, and the engineer did submit a report that I think the commission did a copy of. And essentially what the town engineer said is, in response to the referral, was that there was insufficient information provided in order to determine if the sight lines are adequate for the existing condition. So that essentially was what was presented at the hearing and the issues that were discussed. And at this point, if there's any questions, that's all I have right now.
Thank you. And I believe everyone listened or was present at both sessions, correct? I'll entertain a motion on this for discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr.
I will make the
Barrett.
motion to deny this application.
Commissioner Barrett has moved to deny. Is there a
I'm
second?
going to second it.
Commissioner Neely, second. And before we go on, I just want to read something into the record, and then I'll let Commissioner Barrett begin to discuss, just so we have a complete record. There was a reference made to Section 2.1.4.4 of the subdivision regulations, which provides safe and adequate sight lines for the particular conditions as determined by the town engineer shall be required. And that's the reason that a request was made following the last hearing. If you remember, at the last hearing, certain documentation was received, and there was certain testimony from the applicant through counsel regarding sight lines, and there was a revised drawing submitted. And just to read into the record the response of Laura Pooley, so we have it on the record. That's dated Monday, March 4th, 2013, to Mr. Wendt. Jim, at your request, I've reviewed the proposed site plan prepared for Benevolent Protective Order of Elks, number 2220, Inc., dated January 18th. That's a typo. It's 23012, and last revised on February 26, 2013. The plan does depict sight line details for Lot 1 and 2. However, insufficient information is provided in order to determine if the sight lines are adequate for the existing condition. Profiles of each of the sight lines for each lot should be provided. Design criteria should also be included to substantiate whether the sight lines shown are adequate for the existing conditions, vehicle speed, slope of road, etc., and are acceptable based on the recommended design parameters. I hope this information is helpful in reviewing the subdivision application. Laura Pooley, P.E., Senior Civil Engineer, Town of Fairfield. Just wanted to read that into the record. And Commissioner Barrett?
Thanks, Mr. LeClaire. And my main reason for denying it has to do with sightlines. Of course, I mean, we can discuss the application and anything else that, comes out of it. And it really is the sightlines. The town engineer determined that inadequate information was provided. Mr. Jovanchik's right, and I think I mentioned that text during the hearing, but I neglected to mention another text, which is actually more specific, and our regulations are part of any record, in section 1.1.14, which was approved the same time as the other section. At the end, it says, and this was added in 2009, and that adequate sight lines for individual driveways have been provided. So there is something in our regulation that addresses individual driveways, not just roads, and then it also later on goes to say that it needs to be determined by the town engineer. So we were given sight lines, we weren't giving vehicle speed or slope or any of the other conditions that she could use to make that determination. Say that intuitive, none of us are traffic engineers. If they told us the sight line was 10 feet and the subdivision was, right near a crest of a hill, I think anybody could determine that would be inadequate. If they said it was 1,000 feet, I think that we could determine no matter what the vehicle speed is probably adequate. With 200, it's not. It really depends on the speed. I think that came out during the hearing. So I'm not saying it doesn't comply. I'm saying we have insufficient information, so I can't really vote to approve unless I'm sure that the driveways are safe. So that's why I would vote to deny.
Thank you, Commissioner Barrett. Commissioner Neely?
I've been out there several times. I've been out there during the day, coming down the hill onto Brookside, coming from the other direction. I was out there at night, and it's dark, and you can't even see a headlight coming up in the dark up that hill. If I didn't just gently get onto the road, my car would have been hit. There's no question in my mind. But it's coming from two different directions, and three different directions. I find it quite dangerous. Because of the hill is there, it's blocking any vision for a driver coming from either direction. And I've been out there during the day and at nighttime as well. And that's why I'm not in favor at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs.
Part of this also has to do with that the application is incomplete, and it's the responsibility of the attorney who's bringing the application forward to give us a complete application. It's not our job to coax the information out of him. He knows the regulations, or should know the regulations. The regulations are available to anyone who wants them from town. They're available at Town Hall, and the attorney coming before us has to meet those regulations. He actually was arguing the points of the regulations that he didn't think he needed to meet them. I do not believe that he met our regulations as they are now. I agree that coming in that area there are problems, and I would like more information from a qualified traffic engineer before a decision, to approve is made. And in the meantime, since this must come to a vote, I will be supporting a denial of this application, which would be an approval of the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Jacobs. Commissioner Jacobson?
I agree. I agree with the comments of my colleagues. I think this intersection is very dangerous, and we definitely need more information. The application was incomplete, and I will support a denial as well.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion by any member of the commission? Hearing none, I will call the vote. Again, the motion was to deny, so a yes vote is yes to deny this. A no vote is to not deny it, obviously. So if you are in favor of a denial, that is the motion, vote yes. So all in favor of the motion to deny signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Items carries 6-1-0. At this time, we have no further business on the agenda for the executive session, so we will stand in a brief recess while we reconfigure the room for public hearing. We're back in session. Again, for the record, this is the March 12th, 2013 meeting of the Town of Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. We're beginning the public hearing portion of the meeting. We have two items on public hearing tonight. The first is a continuation of 893 Sasko Hill Road, re-subdivision of Bernard and Cynthia McDonald for 2 lots in a AAA zone. That began April 8th, was continued April 22nd, continued again for further testimony February 26th. Second item is 85 Mill Plain Road, zoning compliance application of 85 Pond Mill LLC for indoor recreation use with a request for reduced parking and review of overall parking in the design industrial district. We'll begin with the 893 Sasko Hill Road matter. And just to remind everyone where we are on the 4th night of hearing on this matter. At the last hearing, Attorney Fitzpatrick submitted some additional documentation, specifically 2 packets of materials, the first labeled zoning regulations, the second labeled McDonald application regulation analysis zoning regulations. Request was made by Attorney Green on behalf of some neighbors for additional time since new evidence was submitted to respond to the new evidence, specifically those 2 items I just read, and that was granted by the chairman. So tonight we'll begin with any members of the public who wish to comment. And again, the comment is limited strictly to what was submitted at the last meeting, the zoning regulations and the McDonald application regulation analysis that was provided. Following public comment, we will go back to the applicant for any final argument. No new evidence, just any final argument as typical, and then we will close the hearing. So, Attorney Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, staff. Once again, my name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross, and I appear before you this evening on behalf of the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association. First and foremost, I want to thank the Commission for your courtesy, your patience, and for really providing a fair opportunity for the public and for my clients to review the materials in this case repeatedly. And I know these hearings go on, and I just greatly appreciate your patience and the fairness that you've shown. I guess, and more importantly, last time I appeared before you, as I had indicated, I was in the middle of a trial and was running back to the office, and I think I referred to the chairman as Your Honor, and by way of full disclosure, I went to court the next day and referred to the court as Mr. Chairman, so it was...
How'd that work out for you?
Not as well as it did here. Thank you. Okay, so we view the new materials that were submitted by the applicant just as that, new materials, and it was very productive for us to have this time to review the new materials, and we thank you for that opportunity. And basically, the new materials support the notion that this application should be denied by the Commission. And before I review the materials, I'd like to put this matter in a bit of context. And I had talked to the Commission previously about the present condition on the McDonald property, and maybe the Commission will bear with me. This is the same document, but I just want to mark it, so I want to mark Attorney Fitzpatrick's copy of the Commission. And I will give you this one. So it's important in understanding the new materials and understanding this application to review once again the present condition of the property that I had described when I first appeared before you. At the present time, there is a residence on the property here. So this is a residence. And Attorney Fitzpatrick, in his presentation, indicated that there are 2 apartments in the existing residence. In other words, in this building, there are 2 rental units existing at this time. Similarly, there is the Onion Barn, and Attorney Fitzpatrick and the applicant indicated that the Onion Barn was converted somewhere around 1928 or 1929 into a residence, and it was actually occupied by the original owners that constructed the principal residence on the property. So they moved into that and occupied it. Now, at the present time, what came to light during this hearing is that there are 2 apartments in this structure right now that are rental units. And so on the site right now are basically 5 residential units, and the apartments are rented there. And there was an interesting moment at the hearing when we originally appeared before you on January 8th, and there was a moment where the chairman properly asked the applicant if the apartments in the barn are legally existing. That was a question that the chairman asked. In response, Attorney Fitzpatrick said that that was his understanding based on his client telling him that she went to zoning and she was assured that there are literally 4 legally existing apartments plus the home on the site. I've had the benefit of reviewing the hearing, which is readily available at Soundview TV. And I reviewed it again, and again, it's the January 8th hearing, and at 1 hour, 36 minutes, and 50 seconds, you will see that that is the comment that is made as to the legality of the apartments. That's 1 hour, 36 minutes, and 50 seconds. Again, my client went to zoning, and she was assured that there are literally 4 legally existing apartments plus the home. And that's Attorney Fitzpatrick's understanding. Now, my office has investigated whether there are or were any legally existing apartments on the site, and at best, I suppose there's 1 unit that could be an accessory apartment pursuant to Section 6.0, but there's no documentation. There's no indication, there's nothing in the assessor's records or anywhere that would suggest, or in the zoning records that suggests that there's a legally existing accessory apartment. So it's kind of a bit of a vacuum here. There's no certificate of zoning compliance or the like. And, you know, it was converted, I guess, to a residence for the family in 1928 or 1929. That is the main, the Onion Barn. But zoning was adopted here in 1925. But again, there's no record and no basis to find that there are any legally existing apartments on the site. Now, I did not have great comfort when the applicant appears before this commission and when asked a question like that, bases his understanding on a conversation that his client had at zoning. And it didn't give me great comfort when I heard it, and it shouldn't give this commission any comfort at all. And there is not a single document in the record of this case that supports any notion that any of these apartments are legally existing. Now, Attorney Fitzpatrick stated again, and this is at 1 hour, 36 minutes, and 30 seconds, that if the application is approved, there will be a new home on the divided off lot, so a new home here. The original house, which is being renovated, the 2 units here will be eliminated, but that the 2 rental apartments in the Onion Barn will remain. Now, let's go one step further. There's the charred property to the rear, and I had asked that at the original hearing that the application be modified to show the actual structures and to show where they are, but there is a residence here, which you can see part of on this, some portion of it depicted. And then there is a guest home, which I understand is rented right here. So, in response to that, Attorney Fitzpatrick produced a certificate of zoning compliance and distributed that to the commission at the last hearing. And I have a copy of that, and I also have the 2 variances that I had already given to the commission. So I want to emphasize these are not new materials. This is the excerpt of the application for certificate of zoning compliance that the applicant produced at the last hearing, and the 2 copies of the variances that I had submitted at the first hearing. I've stapled all the documents together, so there's one.
These are, Mr. Green, these are documents we already have. You just
They're in the
throw
record,
them
yes.
together, 'cause
They're already part of the record, but for your convenience, and I didn't know, I wanted to be sure that everyone had had them before you tonight. So there was this moment when the applicant presented documents to you at the last hearing, and when I first saw it, I said, oh, okay, so as to the charred property, there's a certificate of zoning compliance, and I said, okay, to myself, and interestingly, somebody on the commission, and I can't recall who, said, oh, okay, but the fact of the matter is, it's not okay, because if you look at the certificate of zoning compliance, the existing buildings on the site, there's a box check that says residence, it says number of families 1, and at the bottom it says guest house. Under proposed buildings, all it says is residence. Single-family residence. And there's some detail on the size of the residence. And then the back side of the application's on the next page. And again, all it makes reference to as to proposed conditions and or use is a 1-family residence. Now, this certificate of zoning compliance was issued with respect to the proposed compliance of the house, and it's dated May 15th, 1986. If you have any doubt that it was the intention that this property would only have a single-family residence on it, you can go to the first variance, which is located on the next page, and you'll see that this variance, which is dated 1987, a year later, says variance of section 3.2.1 of the zoning regulations pertaining to permit use and number of dwellings per lot. permission to allow existing former caretaker dwelling as separate dwelling premises in a AA zone. So apparently, and again, I haven't talked to Mr. Chard or anyone who was there at the time, but I think it's fair to assume that what happened was, instead of knocking down the guest house as presumed, there was a variance to allow a second residential dwelling on the Chard property. And interestingly, the variance was granted conditionally for 5 years or as long as they own the house, whichever is the shorter. So what the ZBA said at the time was basically, while you're living there, or for 5 years, that house can remain, but then it's got to go. And then what happened is, 5 years later, you can see that the variance was recertified, and what it said was, grant recertification of variance granted 3587, granted conditionally for 5 years or as long as they own the house, whichever is shorter. So there was another 5 years added. Now, the variances expired. And interestingly, there was a section of the Connecticut General Statutes adopted, it's 8-6B, that prohibits, in part, limitations of this kind. You can't put these kinds of limitations on a variance. But when I looked today, in fact, that section of Section 8-6B was not adopted until 1993. So the limitations that were imposed, I would submit, were legal at the time, and there was not a statute that prohibited those kinds of conditions being imposed on a variance. Now, I haven't fully researched this issue on what the impact is. And is this a legal rental at this time? I'm not going to offer a firm opinion on that. But to tie this into where we are and why we've gotten to this point tonight, and in terms of analyzing the new material, one of the reasons so many neighbors are interested in this application and frankly upset about this application, and the reason that the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association got involved in this application in the first place, is because everyone started to notice that this driveway was being so heavily used. And why wouldn't it be heavily used? It's serving 7 residential units. How many people live in those units? How many cars were used by the residents in those units? How many deliveries did they get? How many, in the normal course of a day, how much traffic was coming and going from each of those residents? So there was a high level of traffic over a driveway. And the idea of a rear lot was never to accommodate, and no fair reading of our zoning regulations or our subdivision regulations could be interpreted to have a driveway supporting 7 residential units, many of which are on a rear lot, or some of which are on a rear lot, or which may be on a rear lot. So what the applicant proposes now is to basically eliminate these 2 units, leave this residence, and create a residence here. So it reduces the illegal character of the property, the illegal use of the property in terms of the rental units, but it is still an illegal use. Now, what's happening is, at the present time, what is proposed, well, at the present time, even before removal of these units, there is a 20-foot easement of access that goes to here and into this property. And there is a connection to it on a 90-degree angle that basically leads into this portion of the Chard property serving this lot. So there is an existing easement that is 20 feet, and we'll talk about that in a moment. What the applicant proposes is to subdivide this and to create this 20-foot, essentially a flag lot, but a rear lot, which will create this rear lot, which has another 20-foot access next to it. So essentially this lot has 40 feet, but 20 of it is burdened by an easement that serves the back. And that's what's proposed. So at this point, what I'd like to do is move on to the analysis that Attorney Fitzpatrick provided to show why this does not comply with the regulations. And I don't know if everyone has a copy of that material. Yes? Anyone need? I have an extra. Okay. So first page of 13, of the analysis done by the applicant says, the first page regarding the definition of rear lots, we agree on that. We agree fully on that, and in the analysis it states that the charred property to the rear of the property being subdivided here in this application does not have frontage and is a rear lot. We agree with that. And that this will now become a rear lot under the definitions, under section 31.2.28. We agree with that. And we agree that the building lot to be created will have frontage. It's going to be a regular lot. It's not a rear lot. So far, so good. We then get to page 3 of 13. And I agree with the applicant in terms of the definition and their analysis in all respects on page 3 regarding access and rear lots. You cannot have a rear lot in certain zones in town. You can have a rear lot in the AAA zone in which this property is located. Now, when we move on to the bottom of that page, the text of section 2.7, it says, no lot shall be used for or occupied by a building or other structure, except for a farm building not used for human occupancy, unless such lot has frontage of 20 feet or more in width on an improved public street, or such lot has an unobstructed easement of access or private right-of-way. Well, this may be a somewhat minor point, but I will throw it in. This is not an unobstructed access or private right-of-way, this 20-foot access in favor of the charred property, because in fact several of the deeds, and you can see on the actual subdivision map and on the documents that were submitted, that SNET has an easement to locate utility poles within the 20-foot easement area. Therefore, it is not fully unobstructed because it is subject to the location of SNET utilities. But that's a relatively minor point in terms of the overall discussion this evening.
While you're there, do you have a comment on if any, on the first line of that section that says no lot shall be used for or occupy a building or other structure? Do you interpret that being only the singular, only for one building? Is that part of your argument, or no?
We're getting to that.
You're getting to that?
Yes. So the next section at the bottom of page 4 will be, not more than one dwelling shall be served from such easement of access or private right-of-way except as otherwise provided in the subdivision regulations. Here is where the problems begin, because the applicant takes great license and takes great and reads this very liberally. First, in his analysis, the easement of access in this matter serves the charred property only. Answer, no. If you look at the 20-foot easement, this 20-foot easement that serves the charred property, as the applicant proposes it, this driveway straddles, and 10 feet or 8 feet of this driveway is on the easement in favor of charred. This driveway, and again, proposed driveway on the easement of access in favor of the charred property. In fact, as we've demonstrated, presently, or until recently, served up to 7 units and is proposed to serve 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this half of the driveway is on the charred easement. And so it serves more than a single residence. Next, the charred property does contain more than one dwelling, but this state of facts has been approved by variance and zoning compliance. Well, that's not clear to me. That is a conclusion that is not supported based on the certificate of zoning compliance and the variances. And it's not clear to me, and I don't think that the applicant has necessarily demonstrated that the use of the charred property using the easement is necessarily legal. I don't know, but it's the applicant's burden.
You're saying that the easement on the top to the north,
Yes,
as drawn, there's two 20-foot easements. The top easement is restricted to the charred property,
Yes.
correct? And they're proposing the second easement to this, immediately to the south of it. would
Right
be
here.
For what we're going to call the flag lot, the new
Yep.
lot.
Yep.
And you're suggesting that the easement, just so I'm clear on this, the easement you're talking about, you say that straddles, is that the charred easement is not actually on the 20 feet, but is straddling the new easement that's being proposed
The
here?
charred property is in its favor. There's an easement in favor of the charred property that is 20 feet in width, abuts the northern boundary of the property, and is 20 feet.
Sure, okay.
So it's here. So that is the easement in favor of the charred property, based on the deed. However, that easement, that actual easement, the area burdened by the easement, the 20-foot, is being used in part to support other properties with this driveway. And the regulation says, and the wording of the regulation is, not more than one dwelling shall be served from such easement of access or private right of way, except as otherwise provided in the subdivision regulations. So while the applicant may find it convenient to maintain this driveway or keep this driveway, the fact of the matter is the easement of access for the rear property is being used for the front property by virtue of this driveway alignment. And why is that important? I'll get into that, but that's important because I think it's a fair reading. It's a fair reading of our regulations and our subdivision regulations that we did not want driveways for purposes of public safety, access, and the like. We didn't want 10-foot driveways or 20-foot easements to rear lots to support several households, to support several houses. I think the notion was to allow rear lots in very limited circumstances and with limited access. And so it may be convenient for the applicant to have laid this out as it was, but what's happening here is, in fact, the driveway that is proposed for this subdivision. And by the way, in many ways, I view this as a new application. The applicant keeps referring to this as the way it always was, and it may have been for 80 years or whatever it was. But there's nothing before this commission that ever legalized the notion of illegal apartments, unapproved apartments on this property. There's nothing that ever legalized this driveway to support 5 units. There's simply nothing out there, because that was never before the commission, and the applicant never produced any document that said, we had a certificate of zoning compliance back in 1985 or in 1990 or whenever that shows all the apartments on this property and the legal use of this right-of-way to support 7 units or 5 units. And that's what's happening now.
Let me just follow up. I believe the applicant at one point talked about there being 2 distinct 20-foot easements. So when constructed, he'll make the argument, I believe he did already, that the northernmost easement serves the 2 charred properties, if you will, and this next one would serve the flag lot, which according to your drawing will have the 3 lots, the 2 apartments plus the residential unit. If they take that position, is it your argument that both of those driveways technically would violate our regulations because the charred driveway serves not 1 but 2 units, and the proposed driveway, if it's on a separate 20-foot piece of land, serves 3 and not 1 unit? Is that where you're going with this?
I can't, it's difficult, let me break that down just a little bit.
I think that's what they argue, that they're 2 separate.
Arguably, first of all, the existence of these 2 20-foot legal rights, in other words, the easement and the fee. This easement is the conveyance by this property owner where they say, here is a 20-foot easement in your favor, you have the right to pass and repass.
Correct.
And by doing that, the regulations say you can create a rear lot. You can create this rear lot if you have the property in front grant you a 20-foot easement and you create a rear lot. Similarly, you can, under certain circumstances, divide property and create a rear lot or a flag lot, as some people call it. If you have 20 feet of frontage on a town road, you can create this rear lot. So this lot is created by virtue of an easement. That's where this owner is granting to this property owner the right to pass and repass over a 20-foot strip. And then this rear lot is created because this owner retained 20 feet of frontage. So this owner owns this owns this, but it's subject to an easement in favor of Chard. But what's happening here is the driveway has been combined, and instead of creating, for example, 2 driveways, what's happened here is there is one driveway that violates the regulation that says that you can't have more than one residential property served by your 20-foot easement.
Property or dwelling unit? That's what I'm getting at here. The regulation that you just talked about, you said the applicant's problem is not more than one dwelling shall be served. And that followed up my question talking about a building.
And that's a great question, and I was imprecise in my language.
When they say you know, when they say in 2.7, a building or other structure, and then no more than one dwelling
It
unit.
says dwelling is what it says.
Correct.
It says not more than one dwelling shall be served from such easement.
So is your argument that one easement is actually going to serve 2 and the other is going to serve 3 dwelling units?
No. My argument is that by having a single driveway, and again, this regulation, this easement of access,
You're arguing that 1 is serving 7 in this case.
one is serving 7.
5, I'm sorry, 5.
So what you're saying is they put a curb or a little island between the two.
Yeah.
You were to put an island between them 40 feet.
We'd be fine, is what you're saying.
Well, if they built a driveway...
If they made it 45 feet with a 5-foot island in between, it would solve the problem.
If the driveway were... Well, that's an interesting question. The answer is they can create 2, and I suppose 2 driveways. They can be connected. They don't have to be connected. It could be a common curb on the property line,
Right.
I suppose, or not. But the other part of this equation is that there are standards as to how those driveways are constructed. And we'll get to that in the subdivision regulations that say you have to have a driveway that has enough subbase and support so that when a fire truck, which weighs I don't know how many tons, goes up the driveway to support you know, an emergency situation back here or back here.
But it seems like the argument is you don't like the idea of a 40-foot road driveway.
Well, it's not about what I like. It's
No, but I'm
about
just
it's
saying.
about a regulation.
But if we were to
that
make it
says-
45 feet with a 5-foot island going from front to back, that changes the whole thing.
You mean if there was a buffer in the middle of the
Exactly.
driveways? Yes. Well, it's not what I like. It's that your
I understand.
regulation says that the easement or right-of-way, not more than one dwelling shall be served from such easement of access. And that's what it says. That's what your regulation requires. It's not, you know, what I like necessarily.
Can I ask a question?
Commissioner Barrett,
Yeah,
thank you,
I mean,
Commissioner Parker.
I'm sorry to move on, but I just want to make sure I understand your argument, not arguing with you, Mr. Green. So regardless if there was a divide or not, one of these 20-foot driveways, let's be pretend, serves 2 dwellings in the back. And you're
Correct.
saying that does not comply with our regulations, and because this driveway is being newly constructed, in effect, that does not comply. The other driveway is in effect serving 3 dwellings, not necessarily rentals, but 3 physical buildings, and that doesn't comply. Is that part of your argument?
It's part of it, but I'm more concerned with the fact that a single driveway that's located in part on this access easement serves 5 dwellings.
Okay, that's right, 3 and 2 is...
That's
okay.
the larger argument.
Okay.
5 is more than 1, so.
Yep.
And I can't comment on, look, in terms of the legality of this, using a single easement, I'm going to discuss the total of 5 and not get into the 1, and I
Okay.
can't analyze whether this is legally existing without,
that
having
was
more
helpful just to
information.
clarify.
But the fact of the matter is, it's not before this commission either. So the applicant didn't meet its burden that would enable you to sort of close that loop either. So,
And Commissioner Parker, I think, did you want to, before Attorney Green goes on?
Well, in addition to Commissioner Barrett's question here,
Oh, no, you got to keep recording. Are you picking her up?
my current understanding of the property...
Commissioner Parker,
Right.
hold on. We want to make sure you're being recorded. You are.
I want to use this.
Are you getting?
On the drawing here, my understanding at the point I reviewed the initial plans and when I have driven the property, I found that this house is being served here. There's a set of garages and driveways here.
Right.
So you're telling me that even with the current, that there would only be a 20-foot drive going to this property?
What I'm going to suggest is that a driveway would have to be created within this 20-foot right-of-way, and my drawing is crude here.
Okay.
It's more or less like that, within the easement that extends the length of the easement. And similarly, to serve this property, a driveway would be created that serves the other property. And it would be a driveway that meets the standards of your subdivision regulations to, again, support emergency vehicles and the like. And it would be a driveway, and it would be a situation where this commission would be assessing what's really happening on this property. We would have an applicant that produced documents that really tell you.
It's okay, no worries.
It would, an application that would give you a true notion as to what is going on this site in terms of the use, in terms of the history of the use, and would give you a basis to make the kind of findings you have to make to allow subdivision. So, just moving on with the analysis, and I'll move it along. The applicant says, the application before the Plan and Zoning Commission does not include the charred property, proposes no construction on the charred property, and will have no effect on the charred property. Well, once again, that's not completely true, because as far as I can tell, this is the first time in any public forum that the notion of using this property for a residence and 2 rental apartments has ever been reviewed by a commission. So the fact that I can't tell you how long this has gone on, and there's nothing in the record of this case, and as I understand it, no new information that will come in, but there's nothing in the record of this case that reflects how that came about, when that came about, or any notion that it's legal, approved, or zoning compliant. So, moving on to the bottom of page 5, there's a discussion. The required 20-foot frontage or easement of private right-of-way shall be of such character and location so as to provide safe and practical means of access to the lot, to permit a convenient driveway across said frontage or easement or private right-of-way into the lot, and to allow physical construction of the driveway at least 10 feet in width. And in the analysis, the applicant says, the driveway serving the McDonald home and the charred property is already in existence, has been in existence for decades, and will continue to serve the properties presently served in the very same manner. Well, again, once again, the use of the property that is contemplated was never one that was reviewed based on, by anyone, based on the record that's before the commission. Moving on to page 8 of 13, there's a discussion of section 5.2.1, and without getting into too much detail, I think that the second sentence of that says, no walk or driveway shall be permitted giving access to any business or industrial uses or district. And in the analysis, the applicant says, the second sentence states that no walk or driveway shall be permitted giving access to any business or industrial use or district, and then states no such business or industrial use is applicable in this matter. I question that, because there appears to have been a robust apartment business here over the years in terms of the rentals on the site. And they're renting they're in the apartment rental business, and that's, you know, I would suggest that it's not an approved accessory apartment. The applicant readily admits that it plans to rent 2 apartments on the site, and that is a commercial. It's not a proper residential or proper activity in a residential zone. It would fall within a different category. And just moving on to page 11 of 13, the review of the subdivision regulations. The term access way shall mean a private way for vehicular traffic. Again, this refers to serving no more than a single interior residential lot. And once again, I would suggest that the access way this access way, the way this is configured with a single driveway, and, you can divide this one differently, but I would suggest that the accessway is being used, both accessways are being used to support each other in this instance. And in the analysis, the applicant says, in the application at hand, this sentence is inapplicable since the accessway already exists and has been approved in its present configuration by the Town of Fairfield Plan and Zoning Department. And again, they reference the Certificate of Zoning Compliance. Well, that's not true, because when that was approved, based on the Certificate of Zoning Compliance and the variances, it appears that the Certificate of Zoning Compliance expressly contemplated that this was going to be removed. So this really has not been approved by anyone, and certainly there's nothing in the record to support that. And in the final portion of the analysis, on bottom of page 12, 13, it says, said accessway shall be constructed in accordance with this is in the subdivision regulations. The subbase shall be considered the surface course and shall be 10 inches thick and laid in one course. Such improvements shall be made along the entire length of the driveway and shall be at least 16 feet in width. And an applicant in their analysis says, these provisions apply to the construction of a new driveway. Here, the accessway has been in place for decades and has been approved by the Plan and Zoning Commission. I've addressed that. In the application at hand, no accessway construction is proposed. In fact, no change in the configuration or use of the accessway is proposed. Well, that may be in terms of what has actually happened, but in terms of what was approved and what's before you, I'm not sure. The applicant didn't offer anything about the actual construction or detail of this driveway once again. I don't know whether it's just 2 inches of asphalt. There's nothing in the record, there's nothing in the plans, there's nothing that supports the capacity. What is the capacity of this driveway? And once again, it was never approved based on the record in this case, it was never approved for use by 5 residential units or to this intensity by virtue of the use of the property. So, just to wrap it up, the burden of demonstrating compliance with the regulations and with the subdivision regulations is on the applicant. And they simply haven't done that in a way that this commission can, in the reasonable exercise of your powers, in the reasonable exercise of your jurisdiction, you can't find that this is compliant because there's just not a record as to what's truly gone on and what goes on. And one of the things that my clients, the discussions that I keep having with my client, and they understand, is that there are regulations. Property can be developed, and the owner of a property is free to develop their property within your regulations, within your subdivision regulations, within the Connecticut General Statutes. And they're fine with that because there is a process. And really, it's through the reasonable, fair, and diligent exercise by this commission of its powers that my client's neighborhood, and indeed my neighborhood and all your neighborhoods, they're preserved, they're protected, and they're developed in an orderly way. And in this case, I would submit that I'm not suggesting that this applicant can never subdivide their property, and I wouldn't say that to my client, but what I am saying is that in this case, I think that a high level of scrutiny is justified based on what's indicated here. And I think that there should be, you have the power to sort of assure that there's adequate access, assure that the driveway is sufficient, assure that emergency personnel can get to this house, to this house, to this house, to this house. And I mean, and that's to the benefit of everyone. It's to the benefit of everyone in Fairfield, in any development, and frankly for the responders. But I think that you really, in this case, a higher level of scrutiny is is justified. It's not right to rely on what someone may have been told over the counter at zoning in order to satisfy that kind of burden. And I really think that this application should be denied. And that's, again, not to say that this applicant can't come back and with a more thorough record for this commission to find that this meets the subdivision regulations. I don't know if you have any questions.
Anything for
I have one.
Mr.
I
Barrett?
know I'll probably regret asking a question, but I'll do it. Because you're done, right? Okay. Mr. Bean, I know there's different ways of looking at this, so if you just bear with me. The question I asked before. If we were going to disregard the charred property, I'd ask you to do that. Forget about that. Let's say that that's not really something we consider.
Okay.
And we have one 20-foot driveway, easement of access,
Yes.
serving the two dwellings that are there now, plus a new proposed residence. In your opinion, if that were the facts in the case alone, would that comply with our regulations?
It would not. And I am not, again, I'm not commenting on necessarily directly what's happening on the charred property, but if you disregard the charred property, you are still using the access that was granted to charred, that easement of access that is only allowed to support, based on one set of regulations, a dwelling, and based on the other set of regulations, a property. You are still using a portion of this easement, the 20-foot easement in favor of charred, to A, service a residence and 2 rental apartments.
Plus the new residence.
Well, no, the new residence, I think, is getting access
Oh,
here.
okay, I'm sorry. Okay,
Yeah.
Right, yeah, okay.
So not only are you using it for charred, but we know charred's there, but are you asking if charred wasn't there?
If charred wasn't there, would this comply? Yeah, maybe that's a simpler.
If charred weren't there, then I suppose you would be able to create a 20-foot driveway, and but for the fact that I believe there's a business use on the property by virtue of these apartment rentals, I think you could create arguably a driveway, an access driveway. But when you bring any indicia of a rear lot, be it charred or anyone else, and you have a regulation that says that this 20 feet within this legally existing easement can only be used for this limited purpose, and where you're proposing to straddle that, that violates the regulation. There is one thing I left out of my presentation, and I don't want you to, I won't go the long way, I will go the very short way, but none of these other projects that were shown, that were submitted by the applicant, virtually,
We know the drawing you're talking about.
the drawings that were,
I think they were attached, actually, to, those were attached, I believe,
Yeah, they are.
to, were they attached? They were attached to something, yes. We were provided them last time, Attorney Green, by, I think, Attorney Fitzpatrick. You want to approach? We have a highlighted copy if you want to look at one.
okay, I have mine right here.
The first one is, I believe, for the record, is a re-subdivision of, well, it's actually this property.
First one is this property.
Correct.
The second one refers to, the Sherwood Farm.
Sherwood Farms, right.
And the Sherwood Farm appears to, first of all, one of the lots appears to have, you'll see, this is an interesting one because while there is a shared access, the 2 back lots have frontage on Duck Farm Road behind them. So while they are using that driveway, they each have their own independent access. And it's not clear to me how that access is achieved on the other, on that one. On the other, I guess my point is that most of these involve a fee. Both of these have a fee interest out to the road. And in no instance is there any indication of a rental use. In no indication is there an intensity for a single driveway being used for 5 units that basically straddles for 5 units. There's nothing that's directly parallel to this. I have nothing further.
Thank you, Attorney Green. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to comment? Seeing none, Attorney Fitzpatrick?
Mr. Chairman, you'll excuse me if it's a little scattered. The dollar signs offend me. First of all, as you heard from me, there were 2 apartments attached to that home. Those apartments have been abandoned, are not being utilized. Some of that has to be removed to draw this lot line. The fact of the matter is, it's just going to be a residence for my clients, period. So the notion of 2 additional apartments is beside the point. Secondly, the charred, I think a better way to do it, Mr. Chairman, is to go through my documentation. Sure. And I think I cover most of the points in that fashion, easier and quicker. If we go to page 4, the big difference here is the fact when you read these regulations, they speak in terms of access way and easement. You'll see it over and over, such easement of access or private right-of-way. It doesn't say anything about driveways, because the standard, and that's part of what you've seen on this sheet of paper, when I put these examples in before, driveways are very often shared, and very often, and they're shown in the documentation you have, straddle the line. It's just common sense. If you look at, I remember the last one because I did the last one. Mike Barberi did a subdivision on Woodhouse Road. John Fallon, there's a 2 20-foot strips going back to 2 rear lots. The driveway's right down the middle. I mean, it makes perfect sense. There's a shared maintenance agreement. That's the way it works. So Mr. Green is confused when he makes this argument that the easement of access must accommodate the driveway for that property. Simply not the case. We included a condition of approval from Duck Farm, where you mandated, your commission mandated, that I believe it's 3 houses, 2 or 3 houses, shall utilize the same driveway. And there's a reason for it. It makes perfect sense. So you have to, that is the biggest misconception in the analysis of what I've given you.
Well, Attorney Green, just so, I understand that, argued 2.1.1.6, told us that
Hold on a
access,
second, Mr. Chairman.
it's on page 11 of yours.
In subdivision regs,
Yeah, your subdivision regs, he argued on the top of page 11 where you cite 2.1.1.6, he agreed that was the language, but then said the problem is that you're proposing a single driveway for 2 lots, and that's a clear violation, since your driveway goes up the middle. We had the dialogue about whether it's 2 separate
again,
or 1.
Mr. Chairman, it's not, driveway isn't mentioned in these regulations at all. You have to have an access way for each lot.
You're saying that there is an access way, however, the driveway was drawn in the middle of the, where the cars are going to drive in the middle of the access way. They have an
Which
access
is
way.
immaterial. The fact of the matter is, this property has a 20-foot easement of access. That's what is legally required, and it has it. This lot, proposed building lot, has 40 feet of fee and a completely dedicated 20 feet of fee simple ownership on that street. That's what is required. The driveway, you don't see the word driveway in here. There's a reason for that. You know how to write driveway. You didn't. It's because access ways and right-of-ways are very often combined, and you use common driveways. It just is sensible, reasonable, and fair. If I can go back quickly through to the start, in at the top of page 4, Attorney Green argued that this is not a unobstructed easement of access because the utility easements, that's absurd. You know, utility easements go along every street. It doesn't mean the street isn't fair and reasonable, public. You know better than that. There was considerable time spent on the charred property. The fact that, first of all, those conditions of approval on that variance, the law is quite clear that they are no longer in effect. That statute has been, particularly in your town as well, my town as well, by this staff, it's been interpreted retroactively. No one takes those conditions seriously. The zone compliance, which was signed off by Peter Marcel in '86, shows 2 dwellings on that property. Everybody knew there were going to be 2 dwellings on that property. The variance discusses 2 dwellings on that property. Reality is that the situation with respect to charred has nothing to do with this application. They are not an applicant. But there is an easement of access serving more than 1 dwelling. The fact is that that's been approved by this commission and by the Zoning Board of Appeals. Again, in the second sentence I have there, that the McDonald home can be used for residential purposes. First went to this section because it has a frontage 20 feet or more in width to an improved public street. And that is the reality of the situation. If you look at, we go to page 5, and I stated the easement of access in this matter serves the charred property only, and Attorney Green takes issue. Again, this easement of access serves the charred property only. The fact that the driveway crosses it doesn't legally matter. I suppose that your commission could require 2 side-by-side driveways, one here and one here. But this situation has existed for decades. I think it makes little or no sense to reinvent the wheel. It's worked, and obviously it's been safe and usable. The notion of the construction requirements. I mean, if you look at that section, it clearly relates to the construction of a proposed accessway. This accessway exists. It served this property and the charred property for years. Fire protection and life safety equipment has been able to get there successfully for decades. The property was originally constructed in 26 and 27, the charred house in 86. I think the effectiveness and usefulness, utility of that driveway is self-evident. Mr. Attorney Green noted that the rental of apartments could be construed as business or industrial use. I think you know better than that. Apartments are a residential use and not a business or industrial use. Again, there was some notion of that this approval required the elimination of this house. Again, chart is irrelevant to us, and that's not what the record before you reflects. And then I analyze the construction issue. I did suggest, I think at the last meeting, Mr. Chairman, that I had submitted deeds outlining the easement fact of the matter is, I did not submit the deeds. I submitted a copy of the letter that I had written to Attorney Green outlining the easement. Also, the Huntington Plan clearly outlines precisely where the easement is located and also includes reference to the two maps of record that set forth the easement. So I feel comfortable that there's adequate evidence in the record to address that issue. I believe there's no legal or factual support for the points raised in opposition. First of all, this is a subdivision. The charred property is not part of the subdivision. Subdivision law is clear. The commission is acting in its administrative capacity. As such, it has no discretion or choice but to approve a subdivision if it conforms to the regulations adopted for its guidance. The only issue that I think is possibly relevant is the existence of the onion barn, which has been turned into a residence. The fact of the matter is that per the assessors, has existed since 1926. It exists prior to the prohibition in the subdivision regs against two dwellings, and I would submit, particularly since it has nothing to do with the lot to be created, that its existence does not negate the validity of this application. I think the proposed lot conforms, I know the proposed lot conforms to the relevant regulations. I think what you've heard is a very good effort to distract the commission from the real issue. The real issue is, does this proposed subdivision creating one building lot comply with your regulations? The fact of the matter is, it does. If I recall correctly, Attorney Green mentioned that the purpose of the Sasko Hill neighborhood group was to preserve the beauty and historic character of the Sasko Hill neighborhood. Ironically, that's just what my clients look to do. They've invested significant time and resources to purchase this property at a time when builders were looking at it with an eye to tearing down the main house, subdividing the property, and constructing two new homes. McDonald's are restoring that main home in a careful, painstaking fashion, new slate roof, etc. The sale of the proposed building lot has been part of my client's plan from the very beginning to ensure that the restoration of the main house can take place. I would submit that my clients are legally entitled to re-subdivide, creating one additional building lot, and I urge this commission to approve the application. I would be happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Are there any questions for Attorney Fitzpatrick? Hearing none, thank you, Attorney Fitzpatrick and Attorney Green, both for your excellent presentations and remaining focused as we asked you to. This proceeding. This will now close the public hearing on 893 Sasko Hill Road. And we will now begin the public hearing at 85 Mill Plain Road, zoning compliance application of 85 Pond Mill LLC for indoor recreation use with request for reduced parking and review of overall parking in the design industrial district. And I'll give you a second to set up, Mr. Beckman. Or back on the record, Mr. Ekman.
Thank you. John Ekman, 85 Pond Mill LLC, 501 Kings Highway East, Fairfield. Tonight there are two applications before you. One is for an overall reduction to the parking ratio for existing recreational uses, and a separate application for single recreational use. So I'd like to start with the overall reduction. And you may recall that in one of the previous meetings, we submitted a letter requesting a reduction to 2.5 parking spaces per 1,000 for existing uses on the site, recreational uses. And the Commission had a number of comments about that, as well as the overall traffic pattern on the site as well. And so we went back and first I'd like to talk about the revisions to the site layout itself. Rose Tizo, who did the original site plan, went over, walked the site as well, examined the traffic patterns and suggested, based on the commission's recommendations as well, several changes which include more obvious pavement markings to show how the traffic should be flowing back and forth. They put in crosswalks to alert the drivers that pedestrians are in the lot themselves, which was a recommendation from the commission. There was some concern about the traffic flow in the front of the building, which leads over to where the Taekwondo area is. And there had been a planter installed here, which has been removed, and this has been returned to a two-way traffic pattern to minimize the conflicts in that area. As well, additional signage, stop signs have been placed around the site to more fully let people understand how the traffic should actually be flowing on the site itself. So I think with these improvements, it should help the overall flow of the site.
Right now, remind us what your ratio is that's been approved for the site.
The ratio that the commission has been approving for the indoor rec is 3 per 1,000.
And then it's a higher ratio for the deli, I believe.
I think actually the deli is 10.
10.4?
Yes.
It's not
Yeah.
10.4.
The 10.4, the cinch takeout is 5.4, and there's actually a number of spaces for the restaurant that's been approved, which doesn't really relate, I suppose, because it's the patron area.
Right, but the number, the ratio is per 1,000, correct? 10.4 per 1,000. Oh, you took your, I see what you've done, is that's why your ratios are off. You didn't
That's
base
right.
them on patron space, you
Exactly.
put them over the square footage,
Yes.
that's why they're such odd numbers.
Yes.
So the commission, we don't have a 10.4 or a 5.4 or an 8.9, as you know. And why they look odd is, instead of taking, like for Nola Restaurant, instead of taking our restaurant parking and applying it to patron area, what they've done is they've applied it to the total square footage of the establishment, and you don't have, that includes kitchen area, preparation area. That's why we're coming up with these odd numbers for the restaurant uses. So right now, as I recall, when you were last here, you had no extra spaces. Is
That's
that
correct.
You used all your spaces
Yes.
up. And I think we turned down a request to reduce it for 2.5 and suggested that when there's another application, you come back and we will look at the spaces at that time.
That's exactly right. Another suggestion is that we do more traffic counts to correlate with the counts that we've done previously, which we did, and which is in your program right there. And they were done on 2 Saturdays and a weekday in January. And typically, we found in the operation of the building, in the summertime, because of vacations and the hot weather, the traffic drops off, and the heaviest use really isn't around the fall to early springtime. The current counts correlate pretty closely as far as volume goes to the time frames of the day, which were conducted from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., and with the maximum count being somewhat over 200 spaces, and again, the entire lot is 346 spaces. So with this, we've come back and suggested that a ratio of 2.7 per 1,000 for the existing uses of rec that have been approved would be warranted for the site, and that's what we would request be approved.
So if you were to get the 2.7 spaces for the rec use, you have a proposed use wellness center. That's the second part of your application, correct? Applying that, you would be left with only 10 spaces for the site, correct?
Correct.
And how many square feet will you have left?
2,900 feet. And if you do the math, that
will work for the...
That works almost exactly. Correct.
So did you do these numbers going forward, or did you do these numbers going backwards?
Well, we
Did
made...
you figure out how many spaces you have?
Well, we
and
wanted to
how
make
many
sure that
parking
we
spaces
didn't
you
have...
divided?
We wanted to make sure we didn't have to come back again when we're this close to finishing.
You did it. It was reverse engineering here.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we didn't come back. And the numbers were warranted for what's physically happening on the site, we believe.
So you only have 2,900, less than 3,000 square foot left then of all the
Yes,
space on the
that's
site?
correct.
But then again, let me ask you another question, but I think not all the space, well, we have allocated parking spaces, just to be fair, while you're doing traffic counts. I know the NOLA restaurant isn't there.
That hasn't opened yet, that's right.
What else is not there,
Let's see.
of those things listed?
Not open was, at the time, the spinning studio, and one of the tenants is an R&D company, has expanded to 5,000 feet. They weren't open either.
Are they listed on this?
They're under on the bottom third, tenants not open yet.
Tenants not open yet. I'm on the wrong sheet. I'm on your proposed, okay. You have two sheets. I'm good. I have the sheet, the sideways sheet done in landscape.
There, that one.
So looking at that, you have 35 spaces for NOLA. They're
Correct.
not being used at all.
Correct, yes.
And you have Spinning Studio 6, that's 41 spaces.
Yep.
And what's the, what are the other spaces that are not
The
there?
Aya Blue is one of the R&D tenants
And
that's
that's
there.
5 spaces.
That's exactly right.
So 46 spaces.
Correct.
Those are the only 3, just those 3?
That's correct.
So 40,
Yes.
oh, there we go. So there's 46 spaces then, which are not being utilized at all. So adding them into your traffic count,
The highest number being 213.
213 out of 346, even adding into 213, 40, I'm sorry, adding into that 46, 213 is the highest, is 259. And then your new use is only 8 more, so 267. And 10 left, so 277 out of 346. Does that take into account the lot you're renting from the town?
It does not. That's in addition of another 40 spaces.
Okay. And does this take into account the property across the street, the train station? No.
That does not even correct.
This is just the fee, the property you folks own in fee.
Exactly right.
Okay. Commissioner Barrett?
One just more of an observation. I mean, Mr. Ekman, I kind of thought this would how it go, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that, you know, when you started this project, that you start renting it out, you have some experience, and you have a better gauge for what the parking requirements truly would be.
Yes.
And I thought, you know, it might get modified as you went. I also thought that, you know, it might be like, you know, eventually we'll get to the point with like, what number do we need to rent the entire building? And we're pretty close to that now. And
Considering the hybrid nature of it, it appears that it's worked out exactly as we all had planned.
Yeah.
So what do you, I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, that wasn't
Again,
my
I'm sorry,
question.
no.
You can ask the
No,
question.
no, go ahead.
Sure. My question was actually more to the traffic flow. A specific question, if you could just walk me through if I'm entering.
Before we go to trial, let me ask you one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
The hybrid nature of the building, what are you finding, you know, the people are doing when they go there? That there's one car going for multiple businesses with multiple kids?
You know
Have
what?
analyzed that yet?
It seems like carpooling's taking place, and I rarely see one car drop off one child. Rarely.
I'm just kind of curious, as a go forward, as a commissioner, we try to learn, this is something unique for Fairfield, this type of a development.
And
Say the
I
parking
think, given the synergistic nature of the different operations there as well, it lends itself to more people saying, hey, come on, let's go. And maybe for the age of the group too, where the kids tend to interact more together.
Do you find people leaving the kids and taking off more of a drop-off than the folks
You know,
necessarily
that
staying
part,
and
that part,
watching?
I don't really understand that.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
what it
they do.
seems, I would think that.
Yeah.
That's why you're probably less parking, people are not, it's
Yeah.
not a destination for
Yeah,
parents.
That's right. That's understandable. They're going into a supervised area where the parents don't necessarily have to stay there. And especially when programs go on for an hour, 2 hours, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mr. Barrett?
Yeah, I think that's why you might be seeing less parking at certain times, but the place certainly does seem very active, so 2 questions. One, is there any accident history within this parking lot? I'm just concerned about the safety now that it's so rented.
Yeah, and, you know, I've not heard of anything that has been continual, put it that way. Has there been a fender bender there? There probably has, but I'm not aware of anything that's been a real major problem there.
Okay, you talked about improved traffic flow. The next question is, if I enter at Mill Plain Road and I'm driving through, and let's say I'm trying to get to Carabiners, because I'm going to a event at Carabiners.
Yes.
Could you just walk me through on the map how I'm supposed to safely drive through and where there might be some oncoming traffic?
Well, yeah, from Mill Plain Road, the access road comes in straight through here, through where the Nola restaurant will be, and then through here, there are one-way signs. You can go park here, and you could work your way around the back side, flowing straight down to Carabiners here. or you could go straight through here and find your way up through here and back down to Cannery Meters.
And I have to take a left turn around the edge of the building there, though.
Here?
No, back.
I'm
back
sorry.
over there where I actually had a jog to.
Here.
No.
I'm sorry.
When I go
Here, we're here,
around
take
the
your
right
point.
angle of the building, I'm sorry. I'm not gonna be able to do that.
Yeah, okay.
Don't point him in his eyes.
Oh, here,
Right there.
right here. Oh, yeah, you come up here and then you go around here, the traffic flows this way here.
Okay. So the traffic only flows, but the traffic could be flowing against me when I turn.
If the traffic could come here,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay. And then I go in and out from there, okay.
That's one way.
And what are the improvements that are made? They're depicted here, but they haven't been made yet, these crosswalks?
Well, no, most of these are pavement markings, which you can't do until the weather warms up, for one thing, which we'll do. And then the ground is still kind of frozen to put the signs in, although the planter that had been put here has been removed, so this is now two-way access.
I just happened to just do this exact thing like a couple weeks ago, and it was a little, I mean, there was a lot going on there on a Sunday afternoon, and I was just a little apprehensive driving through. Am I doing this right? Am I,
Yeah,
you know,
I think with the, you know, the inclusion of these you know, walkways here, which when I drive and I see any one of those, I automatically go, okay, something's going on here. You look around. And with the arrows on the pavement as well, that'll help direct you to where you should be going.
because, I mean, there also the other thing I noticed, there's a lot of kids going in and out and walking through
Yeah,
the park.
and again, I think that was a very good idea to put the crosswalks in, just to let you realize that something's happening with people and watch what's going on.
Commissioner Alessi?
The other really dangerous corner I see there is that when you're coming in from Mill Plain Road or going straight back, that deadly corner behind Cinch.
Here.
Yes.
Well, there's a stop sign here now, so it forces you to stop here. There's a stop sign here that forces this area to stop. We actually put a mirror up here as well, so that you can look up and see what's happening. Both of them can see what's happening there. And it's clear here, there's a no right turn sign, so there's a lot of visual going on to say, hey, look what's happening.
Are you I assume that you're planning as you know, finishing up this building to remove the dumpsters and some
Oh,
of the
yeah.
storage, the
Yes.
steel that's been stored
Yes.
around the back there that I see on the corner.
And that'll be happening probably, that should be out of by the summer, because we're just about done.
Also, I think you need to, when you're doing your site work, when the weather breaks a little bit, is to look at the curb cut on North Pine Creek again. The cars that want to go into the Mill Plain neighborhood,
Yeah, I
apparently
think
that's
that
been taken out.
Regardless of how we've structured it, people still go that way, and I know the concrete is broken because of that.
I think a plow or something may have hit it.
Yeah,
the concrete's
that's right.
broken. I think maybe
So-
you want to consider putting something stronger that'll
Yeah.
force the cars left, so that'll keep
Yeah.
the way we approved it. What? To force the cars to go left, not, what'd she say?
She's admitting breaking the law.
Noted.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, I think that's running time.
So-
I guess that we understand the parking thing, but I think
Fine.
that makes sense.
Any other questions about this part?
The parking part?
Or the request for the 2.7?
No, I think we got that. My
Right.
colleague, I think we understand that. Thank you. And thank you for the charts. I think that's very helpful,
You're welcome.
analyzing this.
The next is, we have a wellness center which is beginning to take shape with people with Tai Chi and individual type rooms as an operation. And it's not completely filled up yet, but it seems like we'll be headed in that direction. So we wanted to have, bring that to you and ask that that be approved at the 2.7 ratio.
And where's that going to go in the building?
That will go on the third floor of the building, next to an existing Pilates studio that's up there right now. And that would complete the third floor.
Is that gonna be one manager or independently?
Well, it's basically, will be one reception area where people walk in and be able to go to the different operations that are there. So it'll be really one operation, that's right.
Is the restaurant due to open soon, NOLA or no?
I think that should be open by the end of April. They've been working on that steadily, and,
Because I think outdoor dining was a part of that, was it not?
you know,
The original?
it's not on the list here. I don't know that they came through for that.
That's what I wanted to remind you of.
Yeah, they're gonna have to come back and ask for that once they get going.
Okay. I know it had an outdoor portion of it we talked about when it did.
That's exactly right. There is an area there that could support that, so,
I don't know if it was ever approved by the commission.
yeah,
just
no,
to
I think
flag
that, I don't see it on the chart here, so I think they'll have to come back for that.
Any questions, Mr. Ekman, on the new tenant? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any
Thank
member
you.
of the public who wishes to comment on this application? Hearing none, we'll close the hearing on this application. Thank you. And there being no further business on the agenda, this meeting will stand in adjournment.